Hello, welcome to this screencast on what's new in ReSharper 6. We're going to see the support for JavaScript, CSS and Razor, extended navigation, new code inspections and coding assistant actions, code analysis in Visual Basic.NET, decompilers, improvements in XAML support and much more. So sit back and enjoy. JavaScript is now a first-class language in ReSharper 6. We get code completion, IntelliSense for JavaScript, as well as code analysis and refactoring. You can see here that I can write a new function and see that ReSharper offers code analysis saying that these parameters are not used. We can now return some value in this function, getting code completion, and also do refactoring. Offering suggestions. When invoking the newly created functions, we provide IntelliSense. Let's now go over to a different JavaScript file and see other analysis features that ReSharper 6 offers. We can see here that a switch statement is indicating that one of the labels has been duplicated. Over here we can see that there's dead code detection. We can also select with extend selection and move code up and down with JavaScript. File structure is also available for JavaScript. Can now change to a more complex JavaScript file, for instance jQuery. And see that ReSharper analyzes the file to provide the file structure for any kind of JavaScript file. Member lookup is also available. We can search for an element inside any JavaScript file. ReSharper 6 also extends jQuery. We can now get IntelliSense for jQuery and, in addition, code completion when selecting items based on ID as well as classes. In addition, when extending jQuery, for instance, by creating our own function, we can see that now we have IntelliSense for the extension just created. And the same applies for extending methods in jQuery. When including reference paths, we also get completion. If there's a mistake in that file, ReSharper also highlights it. ReSharper 6 also provides CSS support. We can now switch over to a CSS file and we can see that we have under color hightings. When we want to change a color, we can just hit Alt Enter to pick from palette, select a new color, and we immediately get that color highlighted. Of course, we also provide code completion for both colors and all other elements, as well as navigation to different members of the CSS file, and find usages, where we can do find usage of symbol or match tags. So for instance, the find usages will find us all the usages of that symbol. With CSS, we also get file structure. If we open up the window with Ctrl Alt F, we can see that we have the file structure for our CSS and all the elements. One of the new additions to ReSharper 6 is Razor support. We now have complete IntelliSense inside Razor, as well as code completion, etc. We can take this render section, for instance, and we'll duplicate this, cut it, navigate to a div tag, which is also supported in HTML files, and place this guy here, replacing header with footer. If we now go, for instance, to a page that uses this layout, such as index, and start typing section, we can see that we have code completion. In Razor files, we now also get navigation to partial views as well as controllers and actions. All items are now underlined, and we can just press go to declaration or F12 and go to the actual action. Going back to where we were, we can see that we can also do create from usage. Control D to duplicate that. And let's say that we want to create a customer and list all customers. We will see that these items go red because neither the controller exists nor the index. At this point, we can hit Alt Enter to create the controller customer, or alternatively hit Alt Enter on the action to create controller customer and action in one go, which will now create the customer controller for us, placing it in the appropriate folder as well as the action. From here, we could just say return view, hit Alt Enter again, and we can see that instead of invoking create view index by Visual Studio to get the whole dialog box and have to select items, we can merely just hit Alt Enter and say create view index with layout or without layout or partial view, or if we're using web form, select ASPXs. And we have our view created. At this point, we can also say, for instance, we want to use a customer view model, and if that does not exist, again hit Alt Enter and it will create the customer view model for us, placing it in the appropriate folder models. In ReSharper 5, we added the ability of external sources, which allows us to navigate to external sources by downloading symbol information from Microsoft Symbol Server. In ReSharper 6, we have enhanced this by embedding a decompiler inside of ReSharper. This decompiler now allows us to decompile source code for which we don't have the original sources and only have the actual assemblies. If a PDB for the sources is available, ReSharper will try and display the information using the PDB. It will otherwise decompile the source code. For instance, in this project, I have a reference to a library called uTrackSharp for which I do not have the source code or the PDB. If I now navigate to the type connection which belongs to this library, ReSharper decompiles the source code and displays it for me inside the editor. This decompiler is also available as a separate tool, standalone, for free, called .peek, which is available for download from www.jetbrains.com/.peek. Navigation has also been improved in ReSharper 6 with the ability to do combinations when it comes for looking for types, symbols, files, etc. Let's say, for instance, that we want to look up a symbol across the entire solution. For that, we can press Shift-Alt-T and type, for instance, is dirty. The problem here is that we see that there are multiple entries of is dirty. Let's say that we know that the is dirty member that we want to look for is in a specific namespace in a specific type. With ReSharper 6, we can now do filtering by namespace, type, and then the actual member. For that, we can start to write the name of the namespace that we think this type is in. In our case, it would be type. We then leave a space, write the name of the class, and then the name of the member we're looking for. And we can see now that it has filtered to those that match the values that we have entered. Similar to type lookup, we get the same functionality when we're looking for files. Let's say that we want to filter for files that are located under the mapping folder. We can write mapping and then write the name of the file. And it will take us directly to that file which is located under that folder. Going to the Solution Explorer, we can see that we've easily found it. And last but not least, we have the same functionality when it comes to types. I can look for a type which is under domain, component, and filter out by the domain namespace and then directly to the component type I'm looking for. Often classes have extension methods, which are other classes that are defined as static with static methods that are extending the initial class. With ReSharper 6 we can now easily find these extension methods by placing our cursor over the class, invoking the navigation menu, which is Alt left square brackets, and selecting extension methods. And this will take us to the extension methods of that specific class. Often we're located in a method call that has a number of parameters, and we are situated on a specific parameter, for instance in this case on a base constructor call, and we want to navigate directly to that parameter of that actual method. Now we could look up the type, navigate to that type, and then scroll across to find that actual parameter, or we could invoke the navigation menu by pressing Alt left square brackets and select parameter declaration, and that will take us directly to that parameter in the exact position. Go to File member has also been enhanced. We can now select members to be included from related files, as well as filter the results to the Find window for easier navigation. ReSharper 6 also includes over a dozen new code inspections. One of these, as shown here, is the possible multiple enumeration of an IEnumerable when we are doing excessive work looping through an IEnumerable. Another code inspection is that of the return value of a pure method not being used, whereas in this case trim actually returns a value and we are not assigning this value to any variable. A new feature in ReSharper 6 is that of Find Similar Issues. For instance, we are on a file where we highlight an issue that ReSharper is pointing out to us. By pressing Alt Enter to bring up the context menu, we now have a new entry which is Find All Unused Parameter Issues, which will find all issues that are similar to the one we are currently on. By selecting this entry, we are then prompted with a dialog box where we can define whether we want to search for similar issues in the project, in the entire solution, or for instance a custom scope, where we can select the scope and hit OK, and if any issues are found, ReSharper will highlight them for us. In this case we can see that there are 3 parameters that are not used in that current scope. Often ReSharper offers certain hints and suggestions, and not everyone is familiar with the reasoning behind it. We have improved this in ReSharper 6 by giving you access to the Why ReSharper entry, which by clicking on it opens up the browser, providing information on the reason behind the suggestion or the hint. In ReSharper 5 we introduced Convert to Link, whereby we could take a for each statement and convert it into a link expression by simply placing the cursor on the for each, hitting Alt Enter and selecting Convert to Link. In ReSharper 6 we've added the reverse operation, whereby we can place our cursor on a link expression, hit Alt Enter and select Convert Link to Code. A new refactoring improvement we've added in ReSharper 6 is the ability to do in-place renaming. As such, we can just come onto a member, give it the new name, for instance email address, and we see that ReSharper highlights it, prompting us to do rename refactoring. Can hit enter and the refactoring has been done for us. This prevents us having to prompt the dialog box, which was previously invoked by pressing Ctrl RR and typing the new name. It somehow makes renaming a simpler task. In-place refactoring also applies when we want to move static files from one type to another. Say for instance we want to move this method to another type. we can select the method, cut it, navigate to the next type, paste, and we see that ReSharper prompts us to apply move refactoring. A new feature that ReSharper 6 provides is the ability to import using statements when selecting code and pasting it from one file to another. Say for instance we want to select this line, which we can do by extending selection, copy it, now go to another type, for instance new provider, and hit paste. We can see that ReSharper prompts us to import types for pasted code. And as we do that, it imports the correct using statements. Enhancements have also been made when working with strings. For instance, we can create a new string here and say this is the value plus value. We know that we can, from previous versions of ReSharper, use format string for this. In this version, ReSharper highlights the actual placeholders. We can also navigate on that placeholder and see which one it corresponds to. We can hit Alt Enter to remove the placeholder, or being on the string, we can add new placeholders at the position it is currently. ReSharper also provides improvements in terms of options. If we go to ReSharper options, we can see that the code inspection severity has been drastically improved. Previously, we had to select a specific inspection severity by searching through a list box. Now we can just look for it either grouped, categorized by the language type and then the area, or just search for it. So for instance, if we want to look for the var suggestion, we can just type var and then select it and tell ReSharper how we want to treat this. Other improvements in terms of options also include the file header, where we can now use macros. So for instance, if we would like to write copyright for all our license files, we can now put the current year in by selecting it, and this will automatically be applied to all our files without us having to do this manually. In addition, for Visual Basic, we have inspections as well as the new features for Razor, JavaScript, and CSS, where we can define code layout, line breaks, spaces, and in a similar way for JavaScript, including naming style, brace layout. Finally, in terms of external sources, we can also define how we want ReSharper to behave for sources it does not have, whether we want to navigate to Object Browser, use navigation to sources by allowing ReSharper to go and download symbol information, or actually use the built-in decompiler to decompile methods. ReSharper 6 introduces enhancements in the unit test runner, an improved interface that gives us a highlighting of the number of passed tests, ignored tests, as well as failed tests, and a progress bar that is also updated in the taskbar in Windows, showing the progress of the test run. We've also added out-of-the-box keyboard bindings for running tests under context. By going to unit tests, we can see that now we can run unit tests by pressing Ctrl-U-R, debug by pressing Ctrl-U-D, run all tests, run current session, and a new feature which we've added, which is repeat previous run. Let's for instance run this test. We can run it in a context run by coming to the test and pressing the hotkey, which is Ctrl-U-R. And once the test has been run, we can now go to any place of the code, do modifications, and then use the shortcut key of repeat last run, which is Ctrl-U-U, Ctrl-U-U, and have that test run again. The benefit of this is that we don't have to be located in the actual test or have the unit test runner open and that test selected to rerun the last test, making TDD much more efficient. With the addition of support for JavaScript in ReSharper 6, we have also taken it one step further and provided out-of-the-box support for QUnit, which is a unit testing framework used by the jQuery team and quite extended. We can now see that by merely writing tests inside a JavaScript file, ReSharper detects that these are QUnit tests and provides us the ability to run them. Once we do run them, ReSharper then launches the browser, runs the unit tests, and displays the results for us in the unit test runner. We can of course change the browser that we want to use to run these unit tests by going to ReSharper options, selecting QUnit under unit testing, and selecting the actual browser, which can be the system default or a specific one. ReSharper 6 enhances Visual Basic.NET support with code analysis. We can now open a file and inspect all the issues that are present, with the square at the top of the right-hand margin indicating whether there are issues, being red if there are errors, yellow if there are hints and warning suggestions, and green if the file is perfectly okay. Down the right-hand side we can see all the different issues that are present in our file and apply quick fixes to solve the problem. Navigating to all the different entries, we can see that we can now detect dead code also in Visual Basic. Solution-wide analysis is also available, indicating all the files we have with errors across our solution. We can see this using the ReSharper Windows solution error windows also, and navigating to all the different errors that are present in our solution. We can also take a look at code issues in solution, finding not only errors but also suggestions, hints, and other improvements that ReSharper suggests to our code base. When locating one of these, all we have to do is press Alt-Enter and apply the quick fix when appropriate. One of the greatest challenges for XAML developers, be it WPF or Silverlight developers, is the problem of data binding. If we take a binding and we mistype a word, we can only know at runtime whether there has been a failure in the data binding. For instance, here we have binding to strings of login window title. ReSharper 6 now provides us with code completion for bindings, as well as giving us warnings and hints of whether a binding is typed incorrectly. We can see here that it is providing us with a hint. However, we can go to ReSharper options, under inspection severity, XAML, change the data context is unknown to an error, and see immediately that this is now highlighted as an error, and what is more important, solution-wide analysis also prompts us that there is an error in the solution, making somewhat the development of XAML applications easier by giving us a heads up of incorrect data bindings. A new color picker and color highlighting is also available for XAML applications. We can see here that we have a background color of red, and ReSharper provides us with a nice underlining of the color that it's representing. By clicking on the color, we can press Alt-Enter and say Pick Color from Palette, selecting a different color and having ReSharper automatically update the value, be it a standard color or the hexadecimal value of that color.